30 years ago, in a forgotten laboratory, decades before the world was ready, a machine was born that should not have existed. The story begins in a quiet laboratory, the kind of place where the hum of electricity feels louder than human voices. Fluorescent lights flicker softly above metal tables, and the air smells faintly of oil, dust, and warm circuitry. Outside this room, the world is not ready. Inside it, something exists that should not. A machine stands there, unfinished yet unmistakably alive in its presence, its silhouette suggesting intention rather than function. This is not just a robot. This is a vision of the future that arrived decades too early. At the time this prototype was built, robots were supposed to be simple. They were arms bolted to factory floors, endlessly repeating the same motion, welding the same seam, lifting the same object. They had no awareness of their surroundings, no flexibility, no understanding. Intelligence belonged to humans. Machines followed instructions. That was the rule. And yet, in this lab, a small team of engineers and researchers dared to imagine something radically different. They believed that a robot could perceive the world, adapt to it, and interact with humans in a natural way. Not someday, now. Or at least what they called now, even though the world would need another 30 years to catch up. The prototype did not look impressive by modern standards. Its casing was bulky, its movements cautious and deliberate. Wires were visible, sensors protruded awkwardly from its frame, and its outer shell bore the marks of constant modification. But beneath this rough exterior was an architecture that defied the technological limits of its era. This machine was designed not just to execute commands, but to make decisions. The heart of the prototype was its control system, a hybrid of analog and digital logic that pushed contemporary computing to its absolute edge. Microprocessors at the time were slow, expensive, and severely limited in memory. Most robots relied on hard-coded instructions, stored in simple controllers. This one did not. Instead, it used a layered decision-making system inspired by early cognitive science theories. The engineers spoke of perception modules, behavior arbitration, and internal representations of space. Words that sounded more like psychology than engineering. The robot could see, not in the cinematic sense of high-resolution vision, but through a set of primitive cameras and light sensors that fed raw data into custom-built processing boards. Those boards interpreted contrast, movement, and depth, allowing the machine to distinguish objects from background. It could recognize obstacles, track moving targets, and adjust its path in real time. At a time when most computers struggled to display simple graphics, this robot was interpreting the physical world. Its creators wanted it to move freely, untethered from factory rails or predefined paths. That meant autonomy. Batteries were heavy and inefficient, yet the team insisted on mobile power. They optimized every circuit, every motor, every computation to squeeze as much life as possible out of limited energy reserves. When the robot rolled across the lab floor, it did so with an awareness of its own constraints, slowing down when power dropped, altering its behavior to conserve energy. This concept, now standard in robotics, was revolutionary then. But what truly set the prototype apart was its approach to interaction. The engineers did not want a machine that humans had to adapt to. They wanted a machine that adapted to humans. The robot was equipped with microphones and basic speech recognition capabilities, trained on a tiny vocabulary by today's standards, but astonishing for its time. It could respond to spoken commands, differentiate between voices, and even adjust its behavior based on tone and volume. When a researcher spoke calmly, the robot moved smoothly and deliberately. When voices grew loud or agitated, it slowed down, increased sensor checks, and adopted safer movement patterns. It was not emotion, but it was context awareness. The machine was reading the room. Behind all of this was software that bordered on impossible given the hardware it ran on. Memory was measured in kilobytes. Processing cycles were precious. Every line of code had to justify its existence. There was no room for inefficiency. And yet the system supported real-time perception, decision-making, and control. The engineers achieved this by inventing techniques that would later become foundational in robotics and artificial intelligence, decades before they entered textbooks. They used behavior-based control instead of centralized planning. Rather than calculating a perfect path through the environment, the robot combined simple behaviors like obstacle avoidance, goal-seeking, and balance maintenance. These behaviors competed and cooperated, producing smooth, adaptive movement. This approach would later be rediscovered and popularized in the 1990s, but here it was, fully implemented long before the academic world was ready to embrace it. The prototype could learn in a limited but meaningful way. It stored past experiences, adjusting parameters based on success or failure. If it bumped into an obstacle repeatedly, it altered its approach. If a path proved efficient, it favored it in the future. This was not machine learning as we know it today, but it was a clear step beyond static programming. The robot was changing itself. For the people who worked on it, the machine felt less like a tool and more like a colleague. They gave it a name. They talked to it, sometimes without realizing they were doing so. Late at night, when the lab was quiet, they would run experiments just to watch it move, navigate, and respond. There was a sense that they were witnessing something important, something that history might one day remember. The problem was that the rest of the world did not see it that way. Funding agencies were skeptical. Industry partners did not understand the point. Why invest in a robot that was complex, expensive, and fragile when simpler machines already performed industrial tasks efficiently? There was no market for autonomy, no demand for human-robot interaction, no infrastructure to support such advanced systems. The prototype was a solution looking for a problem that did not yet exist. Academic peers were divided. Some were fascinated, others dismissive. The ideas challenged established paradigms, and not everyone was ready to abandon traditional control theory and rigid automation. Papers describing the robot's architecture were considered speculative, even impractical. Reviewers questioned whether such systems could ever scale, ever become reliable, ever leave the laboratory. Meanwhile, the team struggled with the limitations of their time. Sensors were noisy and unreliable. Computing power imposed harsh constraints. Manufacturing precision was limited. Every improvement required custom hardware, hand-soldered boards, and endless debugging. Progress was slow and exhausting, and yet the robot continued to evolve. In demonstrations, it did things no one expected. It navigated cluttered spaces without preloaded maps. It adapted to changes in lighting and environment. It responded to human presence in ways that felt intuitive. Visitors would watch in silence, unsure whether to be impressed or unsettled. This was not the future they had been promised by science fiction. It was quieter, subtler, more real. Eventually, reality caught up with the project. Funding dried up. Key researchers moved on to other positions. The lab was repurposed. The prototype, once the center of so much attention, was powered down and placed in storage. Its code, written for obsolete processors, became increasingly difficult to run. Its hardware aged, components failed. What had once been a glimpse of the future became a relic of an unfulfilled past. For decades, it was largely forgotten. Then slowly the world changed. Computing power exploded. Sensors became cheap and ubiquitous. Batteries improved. Algorithms advanced. Concepts like autonomous navigation, human-robot interaction, and adaptive behavior became mainstream. Robots began leaving factories and entering homes, hospitals, and streets. And as researchers looked back through the history of their field, they began to notice something strange. Many of the ideas they considered modern had been explored before, long before. Archived papers were rediscovered. Old videos resurfaced. Grainy footage showed a machine moving through a lab, avoiding obstacles, responding to human voices. The resemblance to contemporary robots was uncanny. What once seemed impractical now looked visionary. The prototype was re-examined, not as a failed experiment, but as a premature breakthrough. It had anticipated trends that would only become viable decades later. Its creators had seen a future that technology and society were not yet ready to support. Today, when we watch sleek humanoid robots navigate complex environments or autonomous machines collaborate with humans, we are seeing echoes of that early vision. The principles are the same, refined and scaled by modern tools. Perception, autonomy, adaptation, interaction, all present in that old machine, waiting for the world to catch up. The story of this prototype is not just about technology, it is about timing, about how innovation can fail, not because it is wrong, but because it is early. Too early to be understood, funded, or adopted. It is a reminder that progress is not linear, and that some of the most important ideas spend years, even decades, in obscurity before their moment arrives. Somewhere, perhaps in a museum storage room or a forgotten university basement, parts of that robot may still exist. Dusty circuit boards, faded schematics, handwritten notes, silent evidence of a future imagined long before it was possible. And if you listen closely to the history of robotics, you can still hear its quiet. A machine that arrived 30 years ahead of its time, patiently waiting for humanity to be ready.